One of the most common upgrades in the classic trucks market is the installation of an EFI system. Now, while this might sound complicated, it's actually pretty simple, and you don't have to make a bunch of radical changes to your truck. For instance, you could leave the stock fuel tank installed, you could use it. You could use the stock fuel lines. You could even use the stock mechanical fuel pump like we're going to do on this 71. But instead of feeding the carburetor out of the fuel pump, we're going to go to this guy right here. This is FiTech's force fuel system. This has a built-in EFI fuel pump inside this unit. We're going to feed it with the pressure coming out of the stock mechanical pump. The fuel pump internally is going to boost the pressure to feed our Go Street EFI throttle body. This is also a FiTech unit. This guy's good for about 400 horsepower. And the computer and the sensors and everything are all integrated into this one throttle body, making it super simple to install, super simple to wire, and it just makes for a really nice clean package. So that's just kind of a quick rundown on what we're using. I'll give you some more detail as we get going along with this build. All right, we've got our first fuel line hooked up for our force fuel system. This line's coming off our stock mechanical fuel pump, and it's going to the inlet side of our force fuel system. Now, what this is basically it's an EFI pump inside of a sump, and that does two things, the sump. It gives us about a half a gallon of extra fuel, so if you're cornering hard or you're accelerating or braking really hard, the fuel system's not going to starve. It's got that little bit of reserve. But what it also does, it keeps the pump nice and cool. It keeps the pump kind of quiet so you don't hear it, as opposed to like a frame-mounted inline pump. That's what all the OEs do. That's why you see them mounting the fuel pumps in the tanks, because submerged in the fuel keeps the pump cool. All right, so we're going to drop our FiTech Go Street EFI throttle body in place. What's really cool about this system is it basically shares the same real estate as a standard 4-barrel carburetor, but the ECU is built into the throttle body. So I don't have a big hunk of wire coming out that I need to run over to my firewall up into the dash or something where I hide the ECU. It's all built in, so you just got a handful of wires to connect mostly power, some communication wires for the handheld. We've got an O2 sensor that we need to run to the exhaust, so there's wiring for that, as well as a coolant temperature sensor, which will go in the intake. That's super easy. Otherwise, it's pretty self-contained. It's got the throttle position sensor, as well as the IAC, the idle air control motor, and the map sensor all built into the throttle body. It makes the install really simple. So to further illustrate CPP's return line fitting, we brought over this cutaway tank just so you can get a closer look. What happens is you insert this bolt until it's snug. You're going to hold the fitting with a wrench, and as this gets tightened, the lower portion inside the tank is going to deform, and until it deforms until it fills the half-inch hole that you drilled in your tank, and then it starts to fold over like a riv nut, as you can see underneath it. And at that point, it's tight, it's sealed, and you've got a fitting in your tank without having to weld anything up. All right, we're just tightening up our fuel lines. Last line that we had to make, that's our high pressure line. That's going to the throttle body. That's also going to have a 10 micron filter in it, in line with it, and that'll keep all the junk out of our throttle body. We also have a return line that's going back to the tank, and this is the inlet coming from the mechanical fuel pump that we hooked up earlier. So that's the plumbing side of it. It's pretty simple. We're using push lock stuff on here just because we had it laying around and we like it, but it's up to you. The kit comes with everything that you need to plumb this system. You don't need to use push lock. You can use any kind of fuel line that you'd like, as long as it's high pressure rated. Danny, go ahead and crank it over. Okay, with the initial fire up of our FiTech unit, that verifies that we've got everything hooked up and it's ready to rock. The system still needs to be adjusted. We need to adjust for idle, but to do that, we want to let it get warm. We still got to add some coolant, do a couple things before we roll this thing outside and do that. And from there, it's just a matter of driving it around and letting the self-learn feature of the computer fill all the parameters in the fuel map and set this thing up for daily use.